everyone, this is Kylie Duberstein, Extension Horse Specialist from the University of Georgia. This video is part of a video series that we're doing on forage education for horse owners, and it's sponsored by the Georgia Equine Commodity Commission. Today's discussion is going to be on selecting hay for horses with a focus on price. So for many horse owners, price is one of the more important factors when determining what hay they're going to buy for their horse. A bale of hay, a square bale, can range anywhere from as low as $3 to $10 or higher. So a question that many people have is, if I buy more expensive hay, is that better for my horse than less expensive hay? And the answer is not necessarily, and that's what we're going to talk about in the video today. Probably the biggest determinant of hay cost is geographical location. To put it simply, if you buy hay that grows in your area, it will cost less than if you buy hay that grows farther away. If you want to buy a type of hay that doesn't grow well in your area, you have to pay for the cost of transporting it to you. This is true even if you're buying it at the feed store. They've had to pay the cost of getting it shipped too. So what hay grows in your area? For us in mid-Georgia, tall fescue, Bermuda grass, and annual ryegrass all grow very well and tend to be the cheaper options that we can buy. If you want to feed something like orchard grass, or for example, timothy, you're going to pay more because they don't grow well here. For a more in-depth discussion about types of hay, please see our companion video on forage selection. Another major contributor to the price of hay is the quality. Let's spend a few minutes talking about what makes a good quality hay. Quality is affected by a number of factors related to the growth and harvesting of the hay. In general, higher quality hay has more digestible energy. This is directly related to the time it was harvested. As plants get more mature, they get less digestible. If you have all kinds of time in the world, as I'm sure you do, and you actually wanted to watch grass grow, what you would notice is that young grass is more tender. If you were to take a little nibble of it, you would notice that it's sweeter. As the grass gets taller and closer to producing seed heads, it gets tougher. This is because it produces more lignin, a substance that gives plants their stiff, woody properties. From a quality standpoint, increased lignin is associated with lower quality hay. This is because lignin is completely indigestible to the horse, so it lowers the digestible nutrients in the hay. So if you're buying hay and you see hay that has a lot of recognizable seed heads on it, it was cut too late and it is overly mature. The digestible energy is lower in it, so you're paying for something that the horse doesn't digest well. Ideally, that plant would have been cut for hay at a point where it was younger and more tender. It is important to note that higher quality hay is generally more expensive, and it might not be necessary for your horse depending on its nutritional needs. Obese horses that are trying to keep on a weight loss program might not need hay with the highest digestible energy. They might do just fine eating hay that's a little bit more mature, although it's still important to feed them hay that is of a reasonable quality to prevent colic and other digestive problems. You might ask, what is reasonable quality? For more exact figures on how to tell if your hay is good quality, it would be necessary to do a forage test. If you're buying hay in bulk directly from a grower, which is a great way to save money, it's a good idea to ask for a forage test or have one done yourself. For more information on performing and interpreting a forage test, please see our companion videos on how to take and analyze forage samples. It's important to recognize that while it's good to visually appraise hay, you're really just guessing at the quality until you have it tested. For example, if you were to break open a bale of hay to assess its quality, you would obviously want to make sure that the hay is free of trash and weeds. Beyond that, you'd look for the presence or absence of seed heads, hoping to see very few. And you'd also want to look at the leaf to stem content. Most of the nutrients are stored in the leaves, so you'd want to see more leaves than stems. In legume hays like alfalfa, it's easy to see the difference between the leaves and the stem, but sometimes it's more difficult in grass hays. It's important to remember that grasses have leaves and stems too. If a hay was harvested and dried properly, it should retain its leaves, but sometimes if it gets too dry when it's being harvested, the leaves drop off and the hay is very stemmy. So when buying hay, you want to look at the leaf to stem ratio and buy hay that has a high leaf to stem ratio, which means it has more leaves than stems. Another thing you can do is look to see if the stems are fine versus coarse, but this is a bit trickier because you have to know what is normal for the type of hay that you're buying. As plants mature, their stems and even their leaves get a little bit more coarse. So buying hay that is finer might indicate that the plant is less mature and therefore higher quality. However, the problem with this is that different types of grasses are naturally different in their level of coarseness. And a species of grass that's finer is not necessarily cut earlier or higher quality than one that is more coarse. For example, look at these two species of Bermuda grass. On the left is Alicia Bermuda grass, and on the right is Tift 85, another type of Bermuda grass. You can see immediately that the one on the right is much coarser, but in this case, it's not reflective of it being more or less mature. Tift 85 just has bigger stems and leaves, while Alicia is very fine stemmed. So we are not comparing apples to apples in this case, and we cannot tell which one is better just by looking at the stem size. In fact, Tift 85 typically has higher digestible energy than Alicia. However, if we were comparing two bales of alfalfa to each other, and we saw that the sample on the left has coarser stems than the sample on the right, we would assume that the finer stem batch was less mature and therefore higher quality. We are comparing apples to apples in this instance. So in order to make a good visual appraisal, you need to know what's normal for the hay that you are looking at. This is where a hay test can help do the work for you and take the guesswork out of assessing maturity. And what about looking for that green color that we love so much? Are green hays better than browner hays? In reality, the greenness of a hay is typically not a good indicator of its quality. What makes that nice green color is chlorophyll in the plant. Hays that are harvested out west where it's drier tend to have that green color preserved better than hays that are cut on our side of the country. This is because after the hay is cut, it has to be dried before it can be baled. The longer that the hay sits in the sun to dry, the more the sunlight breaks down the chlorophyll. This may degrade the chlorophyll, but it doesn't really affect the other nutrients in the hay considerably. So out west, it's so dry that they can cut and bale hay often on the same day, so that nice green color is preserved. On our side of the country, the hay must dry in the sun a little bit longer and the chlorophyll gets broken down more. That doesn't mean that our hay over here is substandard though, it just means that it's a little bit less green. Again, color isn't a great indicator of quality. Hay can be really green and still be lower in digestible nutrients if it was cut when it was too mature or if it has a low leaf to stem ratio. Again, all the more reason that it helps to do a forage test. For more information on forage testing, see our follow-up videos or talk to your local extension agent to get assistance. Thanks for tuning in to our discussion on hay quality and price, and a special thank you to the Georgia Equine Commodity Commission for funding this video. See you next time!